This story happened when I was a kid. At that time, my father was busy on business, so he was rarely at home. During the day, my mother was busy with work, so she could only send me to my grandmother's house in the countryside.
Wow!
Grandma loved me very much. She often cooked a lot of delicious dishes for me. It was true that only I was loved by Grandma the most when I returned to my hometown. Mom saw that I was used to this place, so she told my grandmother that she would send me here to play for a while. My mother thought my grandmother would be annoyed, but no, she was extremely happy about it. My grandma even said that she could let me stay with her forever. That night, my mother arranged the place to sleep and prepared some necessary things for me when I was here. Before going to bed, my mother asked me if I wanted to go to the bathroom. My mother said that she wouldn't take me to the toilet if I wanted to go at midnight because the toilet was not in the house here. Hearing that, I immediately understood what my mother meant, that she was afraid of ghosts, so she wanted me to go with her. I laughed and teased her that she was so old but still afraid of ghosts. So my mother gave me a strong knock on my head, causing my head to swell with a huge lump. I reluctantly took my mother out to the toilet. It was true that space here was very dark and lonely, quite scary. Because there was no need to go to the bathroom, I waited outside for my mother. Suddenly the air turned cold. The night was dark. The shadow of the trees outside was like a shadow of a person. It looked very ghostly under the moonlight. My eyes just looked around in boredom, and I was quickly attracted to a black shadow. To see clearly, I took a few steps closer. The shadow looked like a person, but it was also quite strange because the neck of the black shadow was long and very weird. So I judged that it must be a tree or a stone pillar. With this in mind, I was curious to see what exactly it was. To my surprise, that shadow moved on its own. Exactly the head of the shadow moved automatically. I paused for a moment, my heart beating faster, and wondered what the hell was that shadow. Was there a ghost? I suddenly stopped and dared not to move forward, so I mustered up the courage to ask if anyone was there. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared and moved slowly in front of me. I froze, held my breath, and asked who it was. The space was quite dark now, so I couldn't see the person's face. The person suddenly stopped and made a humming sound in his throat, sounding like he was trying to say something but couldn't. At this point, I felt so scared that I couldn't even move my legs. Suddenly, I felt the footsteps of that person moving. The shadow once again moved towards me. My eyes widened and the figure of the person slowly appeared behind the wall. I would never forget his face in my life. It was a face full of folds and the skin was mushy like a lump of mud, which could fall off at any moment. The scariest part was his very long neck that made him look very tall and thin like a rotten tree. He groaned as he walked, waving his thin arms as if trying to catch me. With all my might, I ran away, literally being chased by ghosts. At this point, my mother just came out of the toilet and I bumped into her. My mother seemed a little worried seeing me like this. She asked me what happened. I just saw the Bugaboo. I stammered nervously and pointed in that direction. Hearing that, my mother also expressed fear. She immediately pulled me into the house. Because my mother and I made a lot of noise, Grandma came out from the inner room and asked us what happened. My mother was scared and said I just saw a ghost outside. I wanted to explain that it wasn't a ghost. It was a boogaboo, because that guy looked a lot like the Bugaboo movies I had seen. Hearing that, my grandmother reassured me. She asked me to tell her in detail what I saw. I told my grandmother about the location where I met it, right behind the garden, near the toilet. After hearing that, Grandma's face suddenly darkened. She asked me if I had communicated with that Bugaboo. I recalled the scene at that time. I said that because I was so scared, I only asked the Bugaboo a few questions, then ran for my life. When I told my story earlier, my mother scolded me a little for daring to stop and talk to that Bugaboo. As soon as I heard my mother scold me, I felt that I was unfairly scolded, so I rushed to hug my grandmother and sobbed. Then Grandma dragged my mother out, and the two talked for a while about the incident. Then my mother took me to the bedroom early. To reassure me that I was not afraid anymore, my mother promised to sit and watch me when I fell asleep. Then she would go back to Grandmother's room. So I also slept peacefully. While I was sleeping, something was wrong. I heard strange noises coming from outside. The sound sounded very familiar. I opened my eyes. I couldn't see my mother anymore. Perhaps my mother had already gone to her room to sleep, and I was alone in bed. Suddenly, from the door, the fearsome Bugaboo appeared again. This time I could see the terrifying appearance of the Bugaboo. At this point, I was extremely scared because now I had nowhere to run. The Bugaboo came towards me and grabbed my hand at a very fast speed. He pulled me out of bed. Everything happened in an instant. I could feel his scary, bony hand. For a moment, I struggled hard, and my hand slipped from those ghastly hands. He turned to look at me, clearly angry, as if he wanted to eat me alive. Suddenly, he grabbed me by the nape of the neck and dragged me outside. I struggled with all my might, but couldn't resist him. Suddenly, there was the sound of breaking bowls. I didn't know where the sound was coming from. There was no direction, but it seemed to be from all around. He seemed to be very afraid of the sound, and his wrists began to loosen. Then he became scared, in pain. His whole body was shaking. Then he immediately ran out to escape. I felt like I'm going to stop breathing now. The strength of his arm was too tight. When I regained consciousness, I burst into tears and called out to my grandmother and mother. When my grandmother and mother ran in, they said it was all a dream. I just had a nightmare. Because I was still scared, I hugged my mother tightly and cried for a long time. My mother reassured me that maybe it was because I was obsessed with that Bugaboo, so I had such a nightmare. Then my mother hugged me and went to my grandmother's room to sleep with me, so I wouldn't be afraid. But at that moment, I discovered something that made me feel puzzled. I saw a lot of broken bowls on the ground. That night, when I slept with my mother and my grandma, I had no more nightmares. As for the broken bowls on the ground, my mother later explained it to me. It turned out that the sound of broken bowls could ward off evil spirits. And that night, Grandma had a few bowls that she couldn't use, so she took out a dozen bowls from the cupboard and threw them all away. The effect was obvious. I still didn't forget the scene where the Bugaboo grabbed his head and ran out of my room. However, there was still an unanswered question as to why the Bugaboo had such a long neck. Until one day, I heard my grandma say that the Bugaboo that haunted me that day was a ghost that resided at the end of the village. When the ghost was alive, he used to be a child kidnapper. Later, because of debt and his wife left him, he hanged himself. Since then, he had become a ghost that specialized in harassing children in the village.